Paul Thomas, MD. A board-certified pediatrician who got his MD from Dartmouth College and then completed his residency in California, Paul Thomas, MD, is also a YouTuber. He has 1.4 million subscribers here on YouTube. That is twice as much as Dr. John Bergman, the chiropractor that I routinely have to make content about. This man is worse than John Bergman. Paul Thomas is the worst doctor on YouTube.
Take it down.
Paul Thomas is the co-owner of Westside Pediatrics from 1993 to 2008, and then he opened his own practice, Integrated Pediatrics, which is currently in operation, and he boasts that he serves over 13,000 people in the greater Portland area. He also has two other clinics. One is a medical detox clinic and a pediatric urgent care. Now, while he is currently going through some trouble, which we'll get into here in just a moment, he does still have a rather large staff of other medical professionals who basically can do whatever he tells them to do. Now, what we really need to do to understand what is currently going on with Paul Thomas, MD, why don't we watch this video?
There are big things happening, you guys. They took my license. The Oregon Medical Board has taken my license and they think they can keep it. This channel is about to explode in a way it never has before because here's the thing. If I don't have a license to practice medicine, I'm completely free. We've always brought you kids, we've brought you babies, we've brought you warts and sutures and, all the stuff I generally was seeing in a general pediatric practice.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that's most disturbing about Paul Thomas. The reason why he got so big on YouTube is he liked to do what I like to call gross out porn. That's my phrase for it. But you'll see a lot of channels like this. Hey, do you want to see zits popped? Hey, do you want to see a wart removal? Hey, do you want to see this? Do you want to see that? And his channel is filled with it, with clickbaity thumbnails, clickbaity titles, but it also just happens to be, gross porn with kids. There's even, and it is censored. The thumbnail is censored, but I'm censoring it even further. There's a video about a little boy's penis. It's really, really disturbing.
But now, this channel is going to explode so we can see kids from pregnancy all the way to their final breath.
Wait, what? Whoa. To their last breath? This is a produced video. Like, this guy has a producer, and it will... In some of his videos, you can actually see there's this guy who at least understands the process of making YouTube videos, and you can see the way they, zoom in and out and, try and give it, this organic flow, which is honestly the most obnoxious goddamn thing I've ever seen in my life. But if you're producing this, and this is your, they took my medical license video, why in the world would you not reshoot when you accidentally said, we're going to show you videos of children all the way through their lives until their last breath? That's gross. What? Now, to further understand what's happening, we should maybe not just take his word for it. Why don't we look at this article from the WWeek? Prominent anti-vaccine pediatrician Dr. Paul Thomas has license suspended by Oregon Medical Board. Uh-oh. Dr. Paul Thomas, a prominent anti-vaccine pediatrician in Oregon, had his license suspended December 3rd on an emergency basis after the state's medical board found evidence he had violated standard medical practices related to vaccines. The Oregon Medical Board took the unusual step after reviewing evidence that alleged Thomas guided his patients away from getting the standard course of childhood vaccinations, and that patients suffered vaccine-preventable diseases possibly as a result. Nearly 2 years ago, Thomas, who runs a large clinic in Beaverton, was the subject of a WWeek cover story. The initial complaint listed by the medical board matches the details recounted in the story. A mother requested vaccines that Thomas did not have on hand, and he tried to dissuade her from getting her child vaccinated. We'll look at that article here in a little bit. Dr. Thomas asked her how awful she would feel if patient A, her child, got autism, and she could have prevented it, the order states. Again, I shouldn't have to say this, but vaccines don't cause autism. We know that. There is a mountain of evidence against it, and zero credible evidence for it. It's just not real. But the medical board also reviewed troubling new allegations that Thomas appeared to push parents not to accept vaccines, including the rotavirus vaccine, and that several of his unvaccinated patients were hospitalized after not getting the vaccine. That included 10-month-old twins who were suffering from severe dehydration and serum electrolyte abnormalities and required 5 days of hospitalization. The board also took issue with his alleged decision to study his patient's immune response to the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. In doing so, he ordered antibody tests of 905 patients, and the order suggests the tests ordered between 2002 and 2015 were unnecessary, which they, absolutely are. But more troubling were the findings he made and apparently did not act on. That 122 of his patients did not have sufficient antibodies, including 90 of the patients who had not had a second vaccine that is part of the standard vaccination schedule. So he knew that they didn't have the immunity from vaccines and then knowingly didn't then vaccinate them. That is incredibly unethical. Oh, but he has a whole lot more to say about it. Here is a second video about my suspended medical license.
Well, to first put something in perspective, I want to be honest from the heart about something. I was having a hard time. I was having a hard time with the fact that the medical board had an emergency meeting. Like, this was such a big emergency that they immediately, after one emergency meeting on that day, December 3rd of this past year, so just a couple, 2-3 months ago, emergently suspended my license. I'm thinking, what the heck?
I mean, you're an anti-vaxxer, and anti-vaxxers probably shouldn't hold medical licenses. So I don't really know why you're so surprised. But don't worry, He's got a lot to say about that.
So, I'm thinking in my head, I've been listening to parents, I've been doing my research, I've been gathering the data. I actually got the data published, so some of you know that story, right? So we have the data published in a peer-reviewed journal that showed, in my practice, the unvaccinated were having much less illness, much less chronic disease, which was the actual information the board had asked.
Yeah, so we're going to take a look at this study of his and who he was doing it with. So this comes to us from Dr. David Gorski over at Science-Based Medicine. He says, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, which is that the study, apparently unable to find a statistically significant difference in health outcomes between vaccinated and unvaccinated children in Thomas's practices using standard methods, Thomas and Lyons Weiler invented a metric, the relative incidence of office visit, and then did what sure looks to me like a lot of p-hacking, which we can get to that some other day, to find statistically significant differences in the numbers of office visits for various diagnoses between the two groups as determined by billing records over 20 years. RAOV appears to have been designed to crank up sensitivity over specificity, thereby finding differences that might or might not mean anything. The really, really simple way to explain this is like this. In the absence of being able to do what anti-vaxxers always want to do, which is a full vaxxed versus unvaxxed study, which would be unethical and would mean actually putting children at risk, what he did, teaming up with noted anti-vaxxer, Lyon Weiler, was they looked at the incidences of his patients and how often they came to his clinic. Not for what, not why they were there, not the actual things that they were experiencing. They just looked at how often, and they did that through the billing records, which is, that's pretty goddamn ghoulish all on its own, if you ask me. But that's not the main point. The main point of it is rather than have anything remotely close to an analysis on this, it's just a broad kind of stroke of like, well, people who were unvaccinated just didn't come in as often. Not that it might have any other causal factor whatsoever. It's just that's why, and so we're going to go with that, and, fuck it, whatever. It's not science. However, there's more in this article from Science-Based Medicine that shines a little bit more of a light on some of his anti-vax proclivities. Here's a particularly interesting finding by the board. I'll preface this finding by noting that integrative doctors like Dr. Thomas almost always tout their supposedly superior ability to listen to patient concerns and to work with patients. They tout their respect for their patients' wishes, negatively contrasting it with, apparently, the cold, unfeeling, dismissive behavior of science-based physicians. It turns out, though, that if the following allegations recounted in the board's order are true, Dr. Thomas is not so respectful of parents who are pro-vaccine and want the standard vaccine schedule. 3.2. Licensee is insistent and direct in his communication with parents and guardians that they should accept his alternative vaccine schedule. What does the board mean by that? It provides two examples. 3.2.1. A patient's mother sought subsequent treatments by provider X after having been reduced to tears by licensees bullying her into his personal vaccine schedule against her express wishes for a full vaccination for her child. How charming that is. Bullying a mother into not doing the vaccine schedule that she wants. But remember, we're supposed to listen to the parents, unless, of course, they argue with you. 3.2.2. Patient A's mother requested polio and rotavirus vaccinations for patient A according to CDC recommendations, but licensee did not have those vaccines in the clinic, and patient A would therefore not be able to get them. Patient A's mother reported that the licensee questioned why she wanted patient A to get the polio vaccine and asked whether they were traveling to Africa. During the appointment, licensee continually connected vaccines, not specific, with autism. Licensee asked her how awful she would feel if patient A got autism and she could have prevented it, which we kind of touched on a little bit, but I felt like it was important to get that finer detail, the full context of what was really going on there.
So this resentment I had with the board was hurting me, and I just couldn't release it. I've released it. I am completely free of that resentment. In fact, I am thankful. Thank you, board, for taking my license. There's a couple main complaints, sort of the underlying theme that the board has been throwing at me recently. One is that I'm forcing parents to follow a different vaccine schedule than the CDC schedule, or I'm coercing them into doing less than the CDC schedule. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not.
Wait a minute. Didn't we just read an article on that? Actual testimonials of people who say that very same thing, that this man bullies people into not following the regular vaccine schedule. This man even made his own book casting doubt and throwing shade at vaccines. I'm sorry, but douchebag, your own words and the testimonials of the actual parents themselves go against what you're saying right now. And of course, something that he does that all anti-vaxxers do is they always say you just have to trust and believe the parents. You have to trust and believe the parents. Unless, of course, the words of the parents might actually, I don't know, not agree with you, you manipulative fuck.
My intent is always just to be informational, share what I know, and let you make the decision. That's the whole premise of informed consent. That's how medicine is supposed to be practiced. So to any of you who have thought that I'm anti-vax,
before we listen to what he's going to say, informed consent is not what anti-vaxxers say it is. If a parent is trying to figure out what they want to do and the best choice for their child, and that includes trying to decide whether or not to get them vaccinated, and this is their pediatrician, this is the man that they're relying on for actual good information, and he's telling them the wrong information, and he's spouting off misinformation, dangerous misinformation that can actually get their children dead. They are not actually getting informed consent. They're getting misinformed manipulation. That's exactly what it is. But I apologize for interrupting you. You were about to tell us how you're not an anti-vaxxer by regurgitating anti-vax talking points. Go ahead. Let's hear it.
let me set the record straight. I have afforded the opportunity for parents to do all the vaccines, follow the CDC schedule if they want, even in the cases where they want to do every single one on the same day. I mean, it's not what I would do.
See, snake language, slippery snake language. You see, I allow them to do that, but it isn't what I would do. And of course, that's exactly what he's going to tell them. And then again, it is not actually informed consent. It is misinformed manipulation. But I digress. Please continue.
It is absolutely your choice. And so I just wanted to set the record straight there. We vaccinate most of our patients in my practice. We vaccinate every day in my practice.
That's good.
And we don't discourage people from vaccines.
That's not true.
We just educate them so ideally they vaccinate in a slightly more, I don't know how to say it without, I don't want to get misconstrued that there he goes being anti-vaccine. But it's just like the aluminum issue. If you need to get aluminum vaccines, fine, but maybe just do one at a time.
The aluminum issue, which is usually heralded and championed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you know, the guy that went to Samoa and then after he brainwashed a bunch of parents into not vaccinating, over 80 children died in 1 year? Yeah, that guy. You're regurgitating his talking points. That is literally where you are getting these talking points from. Unproven, never actually establishes any scientific fact whatsoever. I've talked about it a million times on my channel, but you're not anti-vax. You're just saying what anti-vaxxers say. Okay.
Right? Because we know the aluminum toxicity data is out there. That's been published. And the live viruses, say the MMR.
There's a lot of things that have been published out there. There are studies that are published claiming that they can prove psychic powers. Saying that there's a study on aluminum toxicity and not actually producing it, because it's not in the description of this video, by the way, of course, is a hollow, empty, manipulative, and shitty gesture. But I have plenty of resources to show you how it is not those things. And of course, I'll include them in the description down below, because I am not a manipulative dickbag.
It's a great vaccine, by the way. It's very effective. Well, the mumps part, 80% effective, but the rest of it, measles and rubella, that's a great vaccine for effectiveness. But it's a live virus vaccine, and I think it's safer if you give it by itself, because when you give aluminum, that messes up the immune system right when your immune system's trying to deal with that live virus, or 3 live viruses in the case of measles, mumps, rubella. So yeah, I just wanted you to know, we're vaccinating, we're not just...
That is 100% an anti-vaxxer talking point. Listen, we're not anti-vax. We actually do believe in vaccines. We just think that you should be aware that these vaccines are in fact very dangerous and that you should instead do it in the way that we think you should do it because we say so. Not that we have any actual peer-reviewed information. Not that we can actually back up anything that we're saying. No. That's ridiculous, okay? No, instead, just believe us. And please don't look too hard at our smoke screen, okay? This guy drives me crazy. Now, it's important that we actually listen to the language that he uses, okay? Paul Thomas wants you to believe that he is not an anti-vaxxer. That despite all of the ways in which he might regurgitate and restate and otherwise completely, if not fully, 100% co-sign and support the anti-vax talking points, he himself he's not an actual anti-vaxxer. Not him. Why would he want to do that? A lot of the details that I found on him come from his page on Physicians for Informed Consent. And this is an anti-vax website. That's exactly what it is. That's the entire purpose of the website itself. But here's his blurb that he himself gave them to be published. In 2003, I attended the Defeat Autism Now conference at the request of one of my patients' mother. Watching video after video of 1 to 2-year-old children who were normal at 1 year regress into full-blown serious autism was too much to ignore. Tears rolled down my face as I came to the realization, we've poisoned a generation. Then, with my eyes open, I started doing my own research into the issue of toxins and vaccine safety and side effects. The last straw was in November of 2007 when I saw Jack, my 4th patient, to regress into autism in the previous 4 years. I had to make the decision to leave my colleagues, start my own practice, and offer an alternative vaccine schedule. You can't get much more anti-vaxxer than that. Vaccines don't cause autism. We have every evidence that they do not. We poisoned a generation. Poisoned. Vaccines are poison. Yeah. Anti-vaxxer.
One of the hardest things I've had to deal with is dealing with the medical board. It's just the most triggering thing in my entire life. It's like I'm under attack. The biggest charge the board has is the vaccine issue. So my license was suspended December 3rd. As stated per their complaint, I was a danger to the community. To be accused of being a danger when in fact that's the exact opposite of everything I'm about, yeah, that pissed me off.
Good. You're an anti-vaxxer. That you are losing your medical license is absolutely 100% what should happen. Like there's not even any wiggle room in this. It's not like did he really do like any damage? Which you'll see in a moment. He absolutely has. But no, that's the very, very bare minimum. Yeah, no, you should not be allowed to be a doctor anymore. That's all there is to it. Sorry.
That a medical board would target someone who's actually one of the only people in the community who gives patients the true opportunity for informed consent. I knew that publishing that book, The Vaccine Friendly Plan, would put me in danger of being taken.
Okay. First of all, we're going to have to just only briefly touch on his "I'm one of the best people, listen. Nobody talks to families like I do about vaccines. Nobody makes sure that they're the most informedest of the most consentist of, okay, like this, it's huge, it's unbelievable." We'll get past that incredible amount of self-dick suck there. We need to zoom in on his bookshelf. Kowalski Enhance. All of those are anti-vaxxer books. And in fact, you can even see on this one, that's a book written by Andrew Wakefield. Now, this is a guy who is desperately trying to convince people, like, look, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, okay? I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just happen to pose while I'm talking about the anti-vax issue in front of my bookshelf that has books literally written by Andrew goddamn Wakefield. Okay. All right.
The families who are suffering vaccine injury are our heroes. And sadly, they're sidelined. They don't have a voice. If I was to not write that book, if I was to not publish the data that's sitting in front of me, what am I saying to those kids who have taken it for the team? Understand, some people can be fully vaccinated and do great. And in fact, most people. That's a good thing. But we need to identify who's at highest risk so that maybe we can shield them from the harm, and we now have the tools.
Okay. Let's think about that for a minute. First of all, listening to vaccine-damaged families, which, I mean, it does happen, but it's incredibly rare for it to actually be a vaccine that caused harm to the child. Sure, listening to those families, I understand, but saying that they don't have a voice, it is a massive, massive racket right now, and it's very profitable for anti-vaxxers to basically gas up these families that are already hysterical over the tragedy that they've had to endure, and are angry and looking for answers. These anti-vaxxers gas them up, and then they put their stories out there, and they exploit these families, and they exploit their ignorance, and they continue to facilitate this crazy, crazy idea. There's nothing special about you in that regard. You're not cutting new ground. You're just continuing the same tried and true grift. That's all there is to it. But the real amazing hypocrisy of this is we now have this data that we can shield the most vulnerable from possibly getting hurt. That's literally what a vaccine is. What you just described is literally what a vaccine is. Think about what he said and just change it around to, we need to vaccinate children because children who have compromised immune systems that can't be vaccinated need to be protected. This guy doesn't actually care about the well-being of children. Otherwise, he wouldn't be an anti-vaxxer. Like, there is no middle ground here. There's none. Either this guy who somehow managed to graduate from Dartmouth is a giant moron, or he's an opportunistic grifter. Or maybe he just drank the Kool-Aid. I don't know. Did you suffer any major head traumas in the past few years, sir? Is that what this is? Is it?
Because of the nature of the community I live in, where other practices are discharging these families who have a vaccine injury, they end up in my practice. And so I have this large sample size, and if I don't bring that information to you, what am I? Just gonna go make my money off of, one-size-fits-all vaccine schedule? I'd be a wealthy man, by the way. Filthy rich.
I still don't know where this comes from. I hear this all the damn time. Anti-vaxxers love to bring this up, this idea that there's like a shit ton of money in vaccines. There isn't. There never has been. I mean, vaccines by their own design is a terrible business practice if you're trying to market something and make a bunch of money. What you want is to make a treatment that people have to continue to take over and over and over and over again. A vaccine that confers lifetime immunity, or in the case of tetanus, like a few years immunity, that's not a good business practice. And the fact that there are all these doctors out there that do just give standard vaccines, they're not filthy, filthy rich from the vaccines. They're filthy, filthy rich because our healthcare system is completely fucked up. I don't know where they get this. I don't know. Like, I guess people really do fall for that talking point, but it's absolutely inane. It drives me crazy. Now, this second article that comes from WWeek, it was published about 2 years ago, and if you need any further evidence that this dude is a rampant anti-vaxxer, it is chock full of evidence. However, the reason why I bring it up is I wanted to read this part for you. In 2017, a 6-year-old Oregon boy contracted tetanus after his parents failed to vaccinate him. He became a national news this month after the Center for Disease Control and Prevention released a report on the case. Tetanus hadn't been seen in an Oregon child in more than 30 years. The child stayed at Oregon Health Science University's hospital for 8 weeks, racking up a medical bill of $811,000. When he left the hospital, he once again did not receive the vaccine. The pediatrician that consulted with the family and signed his discharge papers? Dr. Paul Thomas. Thomas says the family called him but declines to say more, citing patient confidentiality. He parries back with his own math. What's $800,000 compared with the money spent each year on vaccines? We're talking billions. And now for this, we're going to go back to the medical board. 3.3.3. Patient D, a now 9-year-old male, was completely non-immunized. Patient D sustained a large, deep scalp laceration at home in a farm setting on August 8, 2007, and was treated with colloidal silver, and his parents suturing the wound independently. Patient D subsequently developed acute tetanus requiring intubation, tracheotomy, feeding tube placement, and an almost 2-month ICU stay in Dornbecker Children's Hospital. Patient D was then transferred to Legacy Rehabilitation. Licensee Dr. Paul Thomas saw patient D for follow-up in clinic. Licensee's notes documented a referral to a homeopath, recommendation of fish oil supplements, and phosphatidylcysteine. He did not document an informed consent discussion about the risk-benefit of immunization for a child who had just sustained and still had the sequelae of and remained vulnerable despite prior infection to tetanus, a life-threatening and disabling disease that is preventable by proper vaccination. So, Paul Thomas did not advise them that he should be immunized against tetanus and instead allowed him to possibly get reinfected. But if you think that's the part that's the worst, it's not. Because before he ended up going to the ICU, that little boy was actually seen by Paul Thomas. And guess what he didn't recommend then? A tetanus shot. He did it twice. Look, nothing about this is especially surprising, not for me. What is surprising to me, however, is that this man has been allowed to flourish on this website and to continue to regurgitate the same dangerous talking points. You see, it's not just that he's an anti-vaxxer. He has some curious ideas about COVID.
Even though the data shows that the people in New York who got massively exposed only resulted in maybe 20-30% being COVID infected as far as we know, if you've got 70-80% uninfected and you open up, they should just have a massive recurrence of infections. If it doesn't happen, then it means that you can develop immunity in your community by having this illness go through the community. When you know that kids don't die from this, oh sure, there's case reports of an occasional death, and I'm not trying to minimize the suffering of anyone who dies, but for the most part, it is harmless to children. Children are not dying. Young adults who are healthy are not dying. Yes, there's case reports, but for the most part, they are fine. Open up the schools, let kids go to school all the way through K-12, no masks, let them get this illness. Mind you, we're going to have to be especially careful about our elders who are at high risk, or older people, or even younger people who have underlying conditions. They need to stay in quarantine. You should stay in quarantine. If you're a cancer patient, you're undergoing chemotherapy, and you get a round of chemotherapy that shuts down your immune system, your oncologist will tell you to stay home, do not go out in public. While we do that process of developing community immunity, we would want to protect our elderly and our vulnerable by strict quarantine. Don't go out in public. And then, within a few months, we could completely open up society and be done with this thing. That sounds bold, that sounds crazy. They've done it in Sweden, and we're going to find other places where this is happening, perhaps even in New York City itself. So we've got to look at all the data and think logically and be smart about this. This isn't a situation where waiting for the vaccine makes sense, because we can't have a safe vaccine without long-term safety testing, and that's going to take long-term, which typically means 2 to 5 years. We don't have that kind of time. We could get this thing all solved in a very short period of time.
Let's stop there. For this video alone, and for those statements that I just played for you, this man should be booted off of YouTube. There is no sane world in which this guy should be allowed to use his platform, talk as an expert, and say the things that he just said. There has never been a natural immunity that we have intentionally managed to do for anything. Quite literally anything. You can even think about historical incidences like chickenpox parties. People still get chickenpox. It's still around. And in fact, if you get chickenpox, you can later get shingles. Yay, that's fun and agonizing and fucking painful. It's never happened. It has never, ever, ever, ever happened. The words coming out of his mouth that we just need to open up everything and allow our children to go and willingly get infected with a dangerous, potentially lethal virus. I don't care about the statistics, but it is a potentially lethal virus. Those are the words of a death cult. This man is part of a death cult. He does not belong on YouTube, and he honestly, he needs to shut the fuck up. I'm so pissed off at this point. Like I can't even wrap my head around this. I just can't. Holy shit. But if you thought that was bad, he's also a mask denialist too. Just listen.
You certainly, even if your goal is not to get this infection, and maybe that is your goal, and that's fine. I don't want to tell anybody how to think. You should not have to wear a mask when you're outdoors in the breeze and nobody's nearby. If you're outdoors and there's somewhat social distancing, physical distancing, you should not have to wear a mask. Masks have their own downside as well. So I'm not going to talk at length about masks today. Cloth masks don't filter out much. The size of those openings are way bigger than the size of the COVID virus. So it's not going to do much. I'm not saying it's completely.
So he doesn't understand anything about viruses either. Oh my God, it's amazing. If you want some science about masks, I do have a video that I've included in the description down below. But hoo boy.
But we're going to bring to the world those articles, that scientific information that is not getting out to the world. So kind of help balance things out, because when you watch the news, you get one view. And it's a view that is purchased, if you want to just say it. It's not that it's wrong necessarily, but you know, it's filtered, it's censored. And so you're going to get a lot of times the other perspective of actual science. So everybody wants the science, everybody wants the truth, everybody wants the data.
So he's going to fix the whole problem of fake news, which he's very slyly, and actually really not that slyly at all, claiming that mainstream science or things that are reported in the mainstream media are fake news. And if you want to get the real science, you need to talk to a disgraced doctor who doesn't have his fucking medical license anymore. That's who you should be talking to, because that's how anti-vaxxer brains work. That's how they manage to think this, and they want you to be dumb enough to actually believe them. Oh my God.
Welcome to my interview space. We will be bringing in, actually today we've got 3 families who have stories of vaccine injury. This is a piece of the puzzle when it comes to vaccines that people usually don't hear at all. So I also wanted just to highlight their stories. They're kind of our heroes. You know, you think about people who go off to war. and lose their lives or get harmed. You know, you lose arms and legs, and they're heroes, right? I mean, they are fighting for a just cause, and they pay a price, and we call them heroes. Well, I feel like our vaccine injured are the heroes of that war, right? I actually don't like the war analogy when it comes to fighting infectious diseases, because that's a complicated topic. I don't think it's the right analogy, but that's the analogy we're using today in our public health arena. We're at war with COVID. We're at war with the flu. We're at war.
It's not a war about fighting infectious diseases. It's a war between opportunistic, lying, and propagandist jackasses like you and reality. That's the war. But go ahead, finish your thought.
War with this, that, and the other, right? 14 different diseases for which we have vaccines. So if we're going to use that war analogy, our injured are our heroes. And sometimes they get sidelined and sort of pushed out, and they're not given the honor they deserve. So I think their stories deserve being heard. I'm a pediatrician. You guys know that. Mostly this channel we deal with the fun and the gross stuff, right? Little cute babies. Oh, your guys are going to be excited to know that real soon we're getting back to cute babies. So
just think, everybody, while he's interviewing vaccine-injured people and preying upon them and feeding them the same kind of shit every other anti-vaxxer does, and he continues to spew misinformation, he's also going to continue showing you gross porn about little babies. Wow, I'm thrilled. I hope you are too. Gee golly. And now, according to his own words, as you've already seen in this video, he is ecstatic and excited that yes, I may have lost my medical license. He has not lost his medical practice, for one, so all of the other doctors that work underneath him can still do all the same things that he did. But even more so now, he doesn't have to be worried about getting in trouble with the board. Now he can just dedicate most of his time to YouTube videos and to use this medium, this platform, 1.4 million subscribers, to spread his anti-vaccine, anti-COVID, mass denialist views. It's hideous and it's disgusting, and it's one of the reasons why he is the worst doctor on YouTube. And to be perfectly frank, he should not be on YouTube. And YouTube probably needs to do something about it. Anyway, that's all there is for today. Thank you so much for your attention. From my family to yours, I hope you are well. I hope they're well. See you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.